Right, UFC Fight Night. Moreno versus Brandon Royval. The first fight I'm going to start off with, and we have fixed the mic by the way, Mohamed Naimov versus Erik Silva. Obvious pick, Mohamed Naimov, unless he goes out there and fights like Amanda Lemos using negative fight IQ. And how do I think he's going to do it? I think he should be able to submit Erik Silva by round 2. And the reason I've gone with round 2 and not round 1, Erik Silva fights in a very weird way. He's 36 years of age, by the way, and he fights in a way where he doesn't want to get knocked out. He would rather be submitted, because watch his last fight against TJ Brown. TJ Brown is horrific. He's not a good wrestler. Okay, I can take that back, but he's not really a good fighter. And all he had to do is just shoot him for a double leg, and he was easily taken down. The takedown defense didn't even look that great. And when he was on the ground, every time he tried to stand up, he gives away his back. And Mohamed Naimov, knowing the fighter that he is, if you give away your back to Naimov, he will submit you. I know you'll see here there's arm triangles, and he likes to be in top mount and do more ground and pound compared to submissions, but Erik Silva's the type of guy who's going to give him the position on the ground to get the submission. Because if you keep turning away your back, you might get ground and pounded TKO'd. But I think Naimov is going to look for a submission, because it's going to be so open when you've got your back taken multiple times. It's going to be instead of punching him, why don't I just go for the rear naked choke? And that's how I think he's going to beat him, because Erik Silva, he is a grappler who can do jiu-jitsu, but if he can't be on top of you, he can't do anything. And that is why I think Mohamed Naimov will have a field day in the wrestling department. And he's a better striker than Erik Silva. Silva's nothing special with his striking. He doesn't have power. He's just your basic striker. Naimov does have power. So he's a threat in every aspect. So I'm going with submission. Right, Victor Altamirano versus Felipe dos Santos. It might look obvious on paper. I am going to go with dos Santos, but I think this fight is going to go to a decision, because Victor Altamirano is kind of hard to finish. His style revolves on shooting a bunch of takedowns and getting that one takedown and trying to make the most out of it, because he doesn't tend to hold people down for long, but he can be held down on the ground. But same with Felipe dos Santos. He's not really a wrestler. He would prefer to be on his back. Cheap box type of fighter. Charles Oliveira clone, whatever you want to say. He's got very fast hands. He's going to be good at teeping leg kicks. And Victor Altamirano, if he can't take you down, there's not really much he can do on the feet. You might watch that fight with Vinicius Salvador and say, that looked good. But that was because he shot for 22 takedowns. He got 3. And Vinicius Salvador, his striking is very average. He just swings and hopes he lands on you. Swinging as a flyweight. That's not how you fight as a flyweight. You need to be more technical. And Felipe dos Santos had that short notice fight with Manuel Cap, and he looked very good in it. There was times in the fight where he was catching Manuel Cap and kind of snapping his head backwards. Not to the point where he was rocking him, but he was catching him with some quick but not heavy strikes, and they were effective. Victor Altamirano, he's got no power. Takedowns aren't that great. He's going to have to strike with him. And I think he'll get outworked on the feet, especially if Felipe dos Santos can work the legs, because he can counter off Victor Altamirano's kicks by teeping them and then come forward and use that cross. So, yeah. Luis Rodríguez versus Denis Bondar. This fight here, I'm not too convinced on Luis Rodríguez. So I actually am just going to go with Bondar. Bondar doesn't have a bad chin. The problem with him is he ain't too technical at times and he's a bit wild and reckless. But the reason I think he'll win this fight via decision is because with Luis Rodríguez, he's young. He hasn't got a high output. And at flyweight, you need to have a higher output. Yes, he's got knockout power, but you're going to come up against guys who, in the UFC, have got better chins. Not all the time, but guys who can take a punch off you because you haven't got that much activity. So the punches you throw, there's not enough volume to accumulate damage. And in flyweight, you're not really going to be one punch knocking out a lot of these guys. Yeah, he looks like he's got good power, but I just can't see him steamrolling Bondar with power. And Bondar's very aggressive early. So an early KO is also possible for Bondar, and it's not moderate favourite, by the way. They're near even if you look at all the companies. But I do think Luis Rodríguez not applying enough pressure and doing a lot of volume is going to cause him to bottle a fight, which would be winnable if he did so. For example, on the ground, Luis Rodríguez will not get Denis Bondar down. Denis Bondar is a better wrestler, and to be fair, Luis Rodríguez did show good takedown defense on that, but this is different. That's on the Contender Series against a guy who's not in the UFC, against a guy who, he hasn't had a good start to the UFC, injured, got brutally knocked out. I know it was a technical decision, it got ruled because of the headbutt, which you might think, oh, he's taking a lot of damage, he might get knocked out in this fight, which is a possibility, but I think Bondar will come back, and because Luis Rodríguez would be backing up a lot of the fight and not throwing a lot, Bondar's going to win on damage. Right, Ziam versus Claudio Puelles. On paper, Ziam should definitely win this fight. But with the way how Ziam fights, against Jai Herbert, it looks very unconvincing at times. He can find himself in the clinch, or his opponent shoots on him. He then engages in the grappling and ends up getting submitted. Not all the time, but we've seen it in the 3 losses that he's had. Terence McKinney and 2 in the others. He likes to engage in grappling, and that's what will cause him to get submitted against Puelles. Puelles is a one-trick pony. He's nothing special in terms of MMA, but he's a good jiu-jitsu guy. He's always looking for the knee locks, and I've noticed with Ziam, he likes to throw a lot of kicks to the legs, not too many to the body, but he throws them to the legs, and I think at one point Puelles is going to shoot on him whilst Ziam's going for a kick, and then he's going to try and lock up a knee bar submission. And I think the way how he could beat him, for me, Puelles has got to do it in the first round. If he can't do it in the first round, unless Ziam shoots on him, he's going to struggle, because he got exposed against Dan Hooker for what he is, because Dan Hooker was able to just kick him in the body and just attack that the whole fight, and what that will do is slow him down and make him gas. He hasn't got a good gas tank, whereas Ziam, he can get better as the fight goes on, but it's all about, will he engage in grappling transitions where he doesn't need to do it? And I think he will at one point. Shoot on him and he'll end up getting submitted by a knee bar or something. But you'll look at his losses and see they're rear naked chokes. Another thing, he does give away his back on the ground a lot. And you don't want to mess about on the ground with Puelles. Puelles caught Dan Hooker with a knee bar, but Dan Hooker was able to fight his way out because he was long and rangy, which make you believe that Ziam, I sounded a bit Scottish then, that Ziam can do the same thing, but I don't think he can. One, he's not as experienced as Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker's got decent jiu-jitsu and decent defense with jiu-jitsu. I can just see a submission written all over it due to the fact that Ziam will engage in these clinch scenarios. Right, Edgar Cháirez versus Daniel Lacerda. We all know what happened. It was a complete mess. Cháirez gets the submission, which would make you confident he's going to do it again. But I think Cháirez will 100% win the fight. But I think this time, I think he will KO him in the second round. Because with Daniel Lacerda, he gets tired around the second round because, well, if he can make it to the second round. Look at that fight with CJ Vergara. He had him hurt, spinning wheel kicks, throwing loads of punches towards him, and desperate to get the finish, and then is gassed out by the second round. You look at the other fights by Victor Altamirano, gets taken down, ground and pounded. Figueiredo, you're going to see, got a knee bar there, and I'm not just basing it off them fights, I'm basing it off the fact that Cháirez isn't just the jiu-jitsu guy, he has good striking. That is underrated, and he's one guy here, you look at his record and think, oh, that's rubbish, but he is one of the guys who could go under the radar at flyweight. Break into number 15. I can't say anything higher than that, but I can really see it. Watching that fight with Tyra was lucky not to get submitted. If there was a few more seconds left in the third round, would have got submitted. I believe he dropped Tyra in the first round, and he's one of them fighters where he is dangerous. The only thing I'll say is his weakness is takedown defense at times, but I think Lacerda, if he's smart, which is a hard statement to make considering it's always the same thing with Lacerda. He will throw and be a very entertaining fighter, but then get finished. He just isn't UFC level. And it's not just the matchups he's been given. There's some here where I'm looking you should be winning that. Well, not you should be, but they are fair matchups. And this one here, Cháirez, you could say, already beat him, and I think he will do it by KO this time because Lacerda will be a bit gun-shy to shoot at him considering what happened last time. And we'll try and keep it at range and try and kick him, and then we'll end up getting TKO'd in the second round. Due to fatigue and due to the fact that Cháirez has got good boxing. Like with Clayton Carpenter, he was hurting him in that fight as well. Jesus Aguilar versus Mateus Mendonça. I am actually shocked by what people are picking for this. Aguilar, I am telling you, will not KO Mendonça. And who do I think is going to win the fight? I think Mendonça is going to win this fight via decision. This fight here, Jesus Aguilar went for like a Hail Mary overhand. It reminds me of like Temba Garimbo against Pete Rodríguez, where he just goes in out there early, overhand right, catches them. That's the type of thing you would see happening like a bar fight. They're in the street, next minute, body hits the floor after an overhand right hits. And Mateus Mendonça, he's a way better striker than him. Don't get distracted by the two losses he had that were both by... No, one of them was TKO, Nate Maness, where he started shooting into the fight. If you think Jesus Aguilar is going to win the fight, it will be by a submission or decision. He will not knock him out because he got TKO'd because he decided to grapple. I believe he got a bit tired after forcing the takedown and then allowed Nate Maness on top. And he just couldn't move and was just getting hit. And then at that point, he's getting destroyed. And I believe his fight against Javid Basharat, that is a horrible matchup on paper because he should be fighting a ranked guy and he's just able to outpoint strike you and bully you in multiple areas. Aguilar's more of a defensive wrestler where he is looking for you to shoot at him and he can jump that guillotine. That is a possibility. It's all about how Mateus Mendonça approaches it with his fight IQ. He needs to fight how he fought in that Contender Series episode where he stayed on the outside and then he was like blitzing into the pocket at times using that 1-2 and he was able to drop his opponent twice in that fight. Aguilar's never been known for that. Aguilar's only been known for, yeah, he can get a takedown on you, but he won't get much control. And I don't think he's going to shoot for a takedown. I think he'll be confident after that knockout he had the other day and think, if I can do it to that guy, Shannon Ross, who's pretty much a striker, I'm going to do it to Mendonça. And that will lead to Mendonça having good success at just beating him up on the feet with the like looping combinations and the body shots. And in my opinion, Mendonça's going to win this fight quite comfortably. 29-28. No, you know what? 30-27. This could backfire horribly. Right, Raoni Barcelos versus Cristian Quiñonez. On paper, I would say Barcelos decision. But I've had a change of heart. I've looked at Raoni Barcelos' most recent fight and he was taking way too much damage. And in the fights where he's taking damage, you're seeing him grapple more than he used to. He did it against Said Nurmagomedov, but he did it in his last fight as well. But honestly, I think Quiñonez is going to KO Barcelos in the first round because Quiñonez is a fast starter. He's not waiting around like Raoni Barcelos. Barcelos is more like a boxer who's not really like light on the feet. Quiñonez is very light on the feet, so it's going to be hard to catch him considering he's older now. I learnt from the last predictions with Henry Cejudo Merab, picking the older guy at a lighter weight class is not the smartest thing to do. And I think Quiñonez, yes, he got knocked out about Kang from getting like over aggressive, but Kang can take a punch. Raoni Barcelos, I'm seeing him get dropped by guys he shouldn't be getting dropped by. You should not be getting knocked out cold by Umar Nurmagomedov. It was a good punch. It was a good left hook, but for Raoni Barcelos' striking standard, he shouldn't be getting knocked out cold like that. He got dropped by like a right hand by Kyler Phillips, and that's what Quiñonez does very well. But he throws it more with like an extended hand, and I think that's going to go straight to his jaw and put him out. No, you know what? I don't even think it'll put him out with that punch. I think it'll be the follow-up because Quiñonez likes to follow up with a lot of punches. And this is probably the first or second most powerful puncher he's probably fought in the UFC. So I think he's going to get dropped in this fight in the first round. And Quiñonez will be over-aggressive again. But because Raoni Barcelos is more of like a going-forward striker compared to counter-striker, I think he's just going to get beaten up, like knocked out after the first knockdown and just get completely just smashed and rendered unconscious, unfortunately. Back in the day, Barcelos would have beaten to a decision, but now, taking more damage, getting older, not as quick as he used to be, yeah, getting knocked out, unfortunately. Right, Manuel Torres versus Chris Duncan. Fairly obvious in my opinion. Manuel Torres is going to beat Chris Duncan, and I think he should be able to do it in, I think, round 2. Because with Chris Duncan, it's a bit like Dricus du Plessis back in the day, where it looks like he's tired, but he's not. And he gets hit so many times in a fight. Like, he takes damage, but just somehow survives, and then eventually gets TKO'd. Well, I can't really say that because he's only got one loss, but from the one loss I saw, and in that other win where he won, he was getting hit badly. Like, really bad. But then Charlie Campbell slowed down, and Campbell looks like he was doing very well recently, but he gets dropped. And against Yanal Ashmus, he was injured during that fight, which made it much better for him. And opponents, for some weird reason, they don't have a lot of volume and activity against him. I don't know why. Chris Duncan's always in your face, like an annoying fighter. But his wrestling was nothing special. And Manuel Torres, I'm predicting, it was going to KO him. Look at that brutal elbow he did on Nicolas Motta. It sent him flying to the ground. And Motta's not just, well, he is a can. But Manuel Torres isn't just like this fluky guy. Like, he gets brutal knockouts. Like, look at that Frank Camacho right hook. It was a brutal knockout. Like, you know when Jeremy Stevens, I said it yesterday, when he knocks people out, they don't move. Same with Manuel Torres. And Duncan, he tends to kind of lift that chin up as well when he's coming forward. So I think Manuel Torres, elbow is probably a likely thing to happen, but I think it would just be like a right cross or hook that just puts him out cold. Not a TKO, he'll be out cold. Right, Raul Rosas Jr. versus Ricky Turcios. I think Raul Rosas is going to win the fight, and I think the way he will win this fight will be a decision, because the way how Raul Rosas Jr. fights, I don't want to look too much into that fight with Terence Mitchell, because he went out there turning into like a proper boxer. Like, when you think of Mexican strikers, overhand right, out cold. And you look at Ricky Turcios, some people will say he reminds them of a bit like a Tony Ferguson, but the Tony Ferguson I would compare him to is like a very slow Tony Ferguson, where Ricky Turcios, when he fights, it looks like he's getting tired, like in the first round, but he's not. He heavy breathes, and he was able to push through adversity, but he's got very bad takedown defense. And Raul Rosas Jr. shoots for takedowns with volume, no setup, just shooting and shooting and shooting for them. Ricky Turcios ain't no Christian Rodríguez. I think he's going to struggle with the takedowns and get taken down constantly over and over and over again. But I think because he's all right off his back, and he's quite hard to submit because he's always looking for submissions off his back. He's not one of them guys who's looking to just build the way back up to the feet. He's looking to try and get a submission off his back. If he can't get the submission, then he'll wait for the opponent to advance position and then find an angle to then either get a submission or get up. His main goal on the ground isn't to get up, and that's why I think for Raul Rosas Jr. there will be a lot of control with him on the ground. After he eventually gets a takedown, which he will do, they will be on the ground, and Turcios will be rolling on the floor trying to take one of the ankles or something, whilst Raul Rosas Jr. is probably going to be looking for a submission, forcing a lot of things. And I think it will cancel out of each other, both of them rushing to get two things, and it'll end up being a 30-20... No, you know what? 29-28, where Raul Rosas Jr. slows down in the third round to the point where he might even get finished, because Ricky Turcios has got good cardio and pushing through adversity, whereas Raul Rosas Jr. will keep shooting. It will become predictable. Turcios will start stuffing them in the third round, and then Raul Rosas Jr. will be a bit tired and back up, and then start getting caught with combinations against the fence. But because he won the previous two rounds, he wins 29-28. That's what I see happening. Daniel Zellhuber versus Francisco Prado. 100%, well, I can't say that, but I'm confident Daniel Zellhuber will beat Francisco Prado to a decision. Prado is extremely young, and you can tell he's inexperienced when he fights. He starts off very aggressive, not at UFC 284 to be fair, but in that fight with Ottoman Azaita, which was an early finish, but it was a good, I believe it was a spinning attack, and it dropped him. And Daniel Zellhuber, he should be able to beat a guy like Prado. Prado hasn't got a long reach. I believe Zellhuber, if my maths isn't right, he has got an 8-inch reach advantage over him, and Zellhuber's all about using the reach, using that jab, kicking to the body, kicking at the leg, move. Look at how much Orlando Venata struggled. He was getting picked apart by Daniel Zellhuber because he's got a very rangy build that is very effective at lightweight. And Prado, being not just young, but sometimes a bit gun shy like he was at UFC 284, he struggled to deal with the length of Malarkey and did not throw that much and just allowed Malarkey to like manage the dance and just jab at range and just pick him apart without overcommitting. You don't need to overcommit against Prado. That's probably where Ottoman Azaita got caught. He wanted to get into like a scrap and try and knock out Prado. You're not really going to knock out this Prado guy, but what you will do to him is you'll just beat him on the outside. And that's what I think he's going to struggle with, because he has to come into the pocket to do damage because of the height disadvantage and the reach. So I think Daniel Zellhuber should put in like an Ian Gary against Jeff Neal performance, but a bit better and exciting. But it won't be too exciting in my opinion. I want it to be, but it won't be. It'll just be Zellhuber playing it safe, Adesanya leg kicking, circling off with Prado slowly coming forward, not doing anything like amazing. But it's good that he's young and he's already in the UFC. Right, here we go. Here's the good fights. Right, Yair Rodríguez versus Brian Ortega 2. 100%. No. Changed my mind. I'm going with Yair Rodríguez, and I think he can do it via KO in round 3. I'm going to go with. Because, no, not round 3, round 2. Because with Brian Ortega, he's been out for a long time. I believe he'll look much slower after that injury. Like usually after an injury and a long layoff, you're not going to be as match sharp. And against Yair Rodríguez, you have to be. Like the wrestling, I know he's fully recovered, but because of the inactivity, the wrestling isn't going to look that good. Brian Ortega's not really a good wrestler as it is. The only thing I worry about Rodríguez is doing all these like spinning and jumping and fighting like combinations that don't look real and something that you would picture in a dream. They will gas him out after round 2. So if it gets to round 3, I'd get a bit nervous if you've picked Yair, because Brian Ortega has definitely got better cardio, and Yair Rodríguez, his cardio looks quite poor. I made a video in the Ilia Tapiria which opponent, you can see that or something. But yeah, his cardio is not good. So the longer the fight plays out, and if Brian Ortega, like what he did in the first fight, tries to get him against the cage and drag him down to the ground, that could cause a problem for Yair. Because when you've got a guy like Ortega leaning on you every minute, that can make you tired. Which is why I think he's going to have to use good footwork, and he needs to attack the body of Ortega and not allow him to get close, because Yair has good body kicks when he does them. Look at the Jeremy Stephens fight. He was able to like turn and kick him to the body to the point where Jeremy Stephens had to go down. Weren't a knockdown, but he had to go down to the ground. And Brian Ortega, being a boxer, he's going to have his hands higher, which he naturally does. And that body kick was going to be very open. So you know what? I think the way how he will finish him is he will body kick him and then start using boxing combinations to come up to the head, drop Brian Ortega and get a TKO finish. I know that sounds like weird to say, but I do think he's taken a lot of damage. Doctor stoppage with Max Holloway. You go to the fight with, where is Volkanovski? That arguably should have been stopped. He weren't even saying the right name or right number when the doctor was in the corner. Like, he looked out of it, but he was allowed to carry on fighting. Like, he's taken a lot of damage, and now his body is not like taking these like rear naked chokes. Now his body's not reacting well to the submissions of Yair, which are very underrated. But do I think he can submit Ortega? Absolutely not. Even if he does what he did last time, like getting that armbar, I don't think he would have submitted him. He just had that fluke injury, but he still would have won Yair, I think, in my opinion. But anyways, yeah, I've got to go with Yair. 5 rounds as well. Right, Brandon Moreno versus Brandon Royval. In my opinion, I'm sorry to say this to you, Brandon Royval will not win this fight. He's coming back, not way too soon, but, well, yeah, actually, probably way too soon. Like, he's had a fight with him. He should have had, like, a proper training camp, had a fight later down in the year, because I like that he's staying active, but honestly, it's going to be a repeat. Brandon Moreno, but in my opinion, it won't be a finish this time. I think Brandon Royval has improved massively, and it's going to be a decision. Moreno doesn't really tend to have boring fights. I'm going to make a weird prediction here. I think this might end up being a boring fight, because Brandon Moreno has now seen the meta to beat Royval. He beat him the first time because of an injury. I still think he was going to win that fight, because on the feet, he's not a better striker than Brandon Royval. I have to say that he really isn't. Brandon Royval's boxing is one of the best at flyweight, but his takedown defense is really bad. And once you can get him down to the ground, he can struggle to get up, and you can get a lot of control time against him. Body triangle galore. All you've got to do is sit in that position, throw a few punches, sit there, make it look like you're active, and he won't get out. And Brandon Moreno has got a good body triangle, so I can see him doing that in the fight. And because it's 5 rounds, Brandon Royval has to pace himself. In a 3-round fight, it's more explosive and it's more entertaining. That's why I prefer, with flyweight, I hate 5-round fights, apart from like Figueiredo and all that. And we have had a good one with Moreno and Pantoja. Usually they don't deliver in 5 rounds. I prefer 3 rounds. And then you make a fight like, what was it? Yair, Brian Ortega, 5 rounds. That's good. But in this fight here, I think Brandon Royval's going to look good on the feet again. But what's going to happen is, he's like a technical brawler. I know that's like an oxymoron. You're going to think, how does that make sense? Like, he has tendencies of a brawler, but can do it in a way without getting like clipped on the chin and getting like sparked. By like throwing a knee as his opponent's rushing in the centre, and then throwing a hook on top of that, and then following up with another shot. Brandon Moreno, he was able to shut the eye of Davison Figueiredo with that good shot, but he won't be able to do that with Royval, because Royval's kind of like loose with his body. He ain't stiff, and Moreno's kind of like loose as well. He's got his like really like strange body movements when he's in the cage, the way he like moves his body and the faces he pulls. But he's going to go out there and just wrestle with Brandon Royval. And then Royval's going to be like, I don't know what to do. Because when people take his back, he tries his best to get out, but he's just not good enough to get out. He just can't do it. It's like trying to do something, but you just can't do it. He tries his best. And I do think Moreno's going to win this fight. I would rather Moreno just stays on the feet and tries to fight with him. But if he does that, it'll end up like the Pantoja fight. He will lose a decision. But I think Moreno will win this by decision, because Brandon Royval, it's going to be hard to submit him, because you look at Brandon Royval's record and you're saying you're using MMA math. I'm not. I'm just saying, only been submitted once. And Alexander Pantoja did it. Pantoja's one of the best back takers in the game. Brandon Moreno is good at taking the back as well. He's got good jiu-jitsu. But Pantoja's not a guy who's easy to submit. You can take his back, but he's very good at fighting his way off it. Very good at it. So honestly, I do think it's going to be a boring fight, but we're going to watch it anyway and hope it isn't. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching. Talk to you soon. Oh, and quickly, I forgot to mention the woman fight. I'm not really interested in this one. Yeah, it might look good on paper. I'm going to go with her. And I've said it on here multiple times, I don't really watch WMMA. You can get angry all you want. I just don't. I'm not really interested in it. And I'm just going to say decision. So, yeah, just to prove to you that I've actually done this, I will confirm it right here. Save. Done. So, yeah. Thank you for watching. Talk to you soon.